It's Thursday, the 2nd of June 2022. Welcome to the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, 5 stories in 5 minutes. Let's get into it. Story number 1, the Australian economy expanded at a faster than expected 0.8% clip during the March quarter. It takes the rate for the 12 months to March to 3.3%. It looks like the Aussie economy is doing pretty well.
Yeah, it is. Not that Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers was saying that yesterday. He said the figures are a snapshot of really serious constraints faced by the Australian economy. A fair bit of politics in that, I think. The great thing about the national accounts is it shows how different parts of the economy are going. Households are spending. That's great. They're spending on transport, recreation, culture, those sorts of things, or at least they were during the March quarter. Residential construction was down a bit, but there was a big pull forward in that sector last year thanks to government subsidies. Business investment jumped sharply during the March quarter. It's not a huge part of the economy, but it does move around a bit. So when they're investing, the economy tends to outperform. There's plenty of government spending going on thanks to the flood payments that were made. Inventories were up, that was helping, but net exports detracted from it. The big risk is inflation, and certainly the measures within national accounts on inflation and wages growth were positive and perhaps a little stronger than other statistics have meant. What's it all mean for interest rates, which is how it affects most of us? Well, I dare say it will add to the argument that the Reserve Bank will move on interest rates when they meet next week.
All right, on to story number 2, and it was a big day yesterday for the new Labor government with the ministry being sworn in. It includes a record number of women and a relatively diverse team in terms of ethnicity.
Yes, the Cabinet has 10 women out of 23 possible positions. There's also another 3 women in the outer ministry. The new parliament overall has 38% women representatives, which is a long way in front of any other parliament. Some of the big winners included Claire O'Neill, who's been promoted to Cabinet and will take on Home Affairs. Richard Marles, the Deputy Prime Minister, will take on Defence. Jason Clare's been given Education. And Linda Burney became the first Indigenous woman to hold the Indigenous Australians portfolio.
Sean, story number 3, we've been talking a lot lately about AGL Energy. The other major coal-fired power station owner and energy retailer, Origin Energy, certainly hasn't been getting the same amount of headlines as AGL, but yesterday it outlined some problems of its own, really sending its share price down 14%.
Yes, Origin cut its earnings forecast for the financial year by 25% and said it couldn't predict what would happen next year. That's enough to scare off any investor. It's having problems with its supply of coal to the Ararang station, the country's largest. Its main supplier, Centennial Coal, is struggling with its own production problems. Now, the announcement came after a cap was imposed on wholesale gas prices in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane on Tuesday. That came because prices jumped 80 times normal levels thanks to the cold snap down the east coast. The Australian energy market operator intervened, set a cap of $40 a gigajoule. That's 4 times normal levels, but a long way below the $800 a gigajoule being charged on Tuesday.
Sean, story number 4, the Insurance Council of Australia says the bill for this year's flooding in Queensland and New South Wales has reached a whopping $4.3 billion.
It means that the East Coast floods are the 4th most costly disaster in Australian history. Now, these numbers are all adjusted for inflation. What's number 1, Michael?
Look, I was going to guess the Cyclone Tracy.
Yes. Well, at number 2, Cyclone Tracy in 1974. The 1999 hailstorm in the eastern suburbs of Sydney is the most expensive, then Cyclone Tracy, then Cyclone Dina in southeast Queensland in 1967. That was 3rd. These most recent floods come in 4th.
Oh, that's just incredible sums, huge amount of damage. Sean, final story number 5 today. In the incredibly traditional world of golf, there's a revolution going on.
There is. Australia's Greg Norman is the CEO of an alternate tour known as the LIV Golf Invitational Series, to be backed by Saudi Arabia, and it's worth plenty of money. Norman has not done himself any favours for seemingly excusing Saudi's human rights abuses, including the killing of a journalist. Anyway, the US PGA Tour and the European and Australasian tours see the new operation as a competitor, a bit like World Series cricket in the 1970s. The first event is due to take place next week, and Norman has managed to gather 42 players, including some really big names. Former world number 1 Dustin Johnson, Sergio Garcia, Louis Oosthuizen, Lee Westwood, All of them are major winners. There are 4 Australians, Matt Jones, Wade Orsby, and 2 younger players. The revolution in golf is here, and the first event is worth $25 million.
Wow. All right, that's it. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Thursday, the 2nd of June, 2022. Remember to hit follow on the podcast, and if 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed on your podcast platform. And every Thursday, we also release our lighter look at business. It is called Safe Word by Fear and Greed. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.